Welcome to my basement, everybody. I brought in a couple of guests because we have a lot to talk about, including the last big game for the PlayStation 4, and we are going to make some predictions and have some speculation about whatever Xbox has got planned for us this week. Joining us from Ars Technica is our old friend Sam Machkovech. Good to see him back. And new to Vic's Basement is Mike Williams from US Gamer. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining me today, and thank you for your patience. We had technical difficulties, and these guys were like, what the heck is up with Victor Lucas? Thought this guy had a TV career for a while. What is going on?
Yeah, but you're so polite that we let it slide. It's good. You've got that Canadian bluster that we work with, yeah.
Yeah, he was real sad about it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Well,
we don't do anything
gentlemen.
with our days.
Let's talk about Ghost of Tsushima because it's still topical. It's still top of my mind. I was playing it some more this weekend. You guys both reviewed it for your various publications. Mike, I read through your review today. You liked it, I think, a little less than Sam and I for some pretty particular reasons. Tell us.
Yeah, Mike, what's up with that?
Wait, what?
Well, I liked your observations though, because you're such a huge fan of Japanese and feudal samurai cinema. I think yes.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. I as I said, I pretty much cleared the entire game in about 62 hours, which is part of what I do, but also means that I kind of enjoy the game.
You obsessed, yes.
Yeah. My issues generally were sort of the camera was probably the major one, which I think a lot of other people have sort of gleaned on to after the game has been released, that there's no lock on, and sometimes the camera will just get like stuck behind a wall or behind a bush and you have no idea what's going on. But probably, yeah, my biggest issues were more story-centric. Like, I enjoyed the way the game played, but I had some issues with how they handled Jin and his whole arc over the course of the story. Without getting into spoilers too many, basically...
We can get into spoilers a little bit,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, because the game's out. People are talking about it.
I mean, we want to be a little light about it.
Yeah, not too much. It's because it's a huge game for sure, and people probably didn't do the whole weekend to go.
Right, the whole thing. So, like, part of the main thrust is this fight between Jin's sense of honor as a samurai, which is how he was raised, and the far more effective tactics of being the ghost. And I think part of the problem was they did, I think, need to have a little bit more of a preamble prior to the samurai getting massacred on the beach, where you got to spend more time as the samurai and see because in the game proper, as the story goes, like once Jin kills the first person as the ghost with the assassination, he's on board. Like, he is firmly the ghost from then on. And then the real conflict is sort of between him and his uncle really isn't in a ton of the game after that.
So
Right.
I gotta say, the game is very weird because when you start out, there are lots of flashbacks about honor. It's a big deal. You do not kill without facing someone, without shouting it out. Jin is pronouncing this very frequently at the outset, and there's an early mission where Jin is told, no, you cannot shout, you cannot claim, you cannot put yourself out there because you might kill a hostage. And so you, in this mission, have to kill 4 or 5 people. And by the way, the stealth, silent killing animations are brutal.
Yes,
because there's a lot of brutality, but a lot of it is like slashing a person right in the face, but there's also sort of like an extra. It's almost because they want you to pay experience points for quicker kills. So at first he's very awkward with it. It's like a child trying to kill a chicken in the barn, and that mission ends without finding the prisoner that you were looking for. So he betrays his whole code for this, and you go, well, that was weird. But you go, oh, okay. I guess we can honor still matters. He did that just once. And eventually I kept on just going, okay, let's see what happens if I just keep playing honorably. Because a lot of the missions early on, the challenge is not, and just through and just swipe, swipe, swipe without knowing things like the pose system and some of the extra gadgets. And then I did one sort of silent kill because it was another like don't get the prisoner killed mission. So you had to go for silence as opposed for boldness. And there was a flashback, and it was Jin's uncle coming to me and saying how bad this was. It was just, and it was like time for that. It wasn't a specific mission. It was just an outside.
Yeah, it's the very first time.
The very first time, wherever you do it in the game, Jin's uncle flashes back after already giving you a speech earlier in some preamble missions, and is like, "That was bad." And I go, "Wait, did I just ruin the end? Like, did I just do the BioShock thing where I ruined one of the paths?" And so, what the game does an awkward job of doing is telling you actually it doesn't really matter. And like the plot eventually catches up with this, with Jin having more reasons to use stealth, with challenge ramping up to use stealth. All of the systems eventually come into play where going for bold, full-on battles and going for sneaky, stealthy stuff, it is an awkward juggle. And I it's just one thing that I chalk up to the game's jank. This is Sony's biggest first-party open world jank game yet. And the torch to here in a second, because I think Victor and I definitely, Mike as well, I believe, played a bunch of Ubisoft games that aren't out yet as we were preparing this review. And I have to say, the things that kind of drove me nuts, which included that tight FOV and some of the jank, all kind of evaporated when I compared them to these other Ubisoft games and said, you know what? I like the protagonist's journey in Ghost of Tsushima, and I like the way that story is meted out in world-building ways. I really like the way that unnecessary missions that don't necessarily dole out a bunch of useful stuff actually made me kind of care more about the world, as if this was a long-running serial TV series. It's a slow burn, almost like an anime of doing simple, cute, inconsequential things that build the world, and every once in a while some sweet mystical stuff pops out.
Yeah, I liked the side missions with Lady Masako and Ishikawa Sensei more than I liked Jin's. Like, there's that one moment, like I just explained to someone, like it's the moment at the climax of Black Panther where he tells all of his predecessors, "You were wrong." For Jin, that moment comes like just before the midpoint of the game. Like, that's in the middle of Act 2, where he just says to his uncle, like, "You are wrong here," like, and it doesn't really matter. And like, I will listen to you to a point, but I'm not going to stop what I'm doing because I know I'm right.
But he also knows that the uncle has a whole bunch of reasons for why he has to project that, even though everybody on the island, this is what really drove me to love this game, is that you know, the loneliness of it and the solitary elements of it were I think a little off-putting when you first start the game, because you know, we're so used to lots and lots of characters populating these open worlds, and you know, people cruising along and exploring together, and the characters talking back and forth about objectives and mission states. And in this game, you're alone a lot, but what does tell the story is exactly this environment that Sucker Punch crafted for. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's also filled with real horror. Like, you see all the dead bodies everywhere. You see the burned out, charred out. And that's what resonated with me, is like, oh my God, I feel the weight of this. I feel like it's incredibly important for me to you know, battle these Mongol oppressors, because they're killing my people. They're wiping out my my world.
I mean, I gotta say, for me, what kept me going is I need something in an open world adventure that's gonna propel me through doing essentially the same thing over and over. And there was a few things. Number one, the stories in which the world was told through other characters, because I like Jin as a kind of goody-goody but willing to bend kind of character. I just felt like that was a good projector on which other characters could be interesting off of. Like, that's why I really enjoyed the side quest. So that's number one. Number two, I really liked how they made something that split the difference between the automatic battling of Batman Arkham and the clumsiness of a giant crowd in Assassin's Creed. I loved having to use poses to sort of go, okay, there's a bunch of guys coming, and it's really about the 8-hour mark, I'd say, that the battling really kicks in, and you're like, oh right, I need to use my gadgets, I need to use my mix of poses to deal with things that get intense. And the intensity sometimes is because the camera stinks, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not hard to restart and get your stuff together. I'm trying not to curse. And so I liked how that battling felt. I enjoyed repeatedly getting into those kind of battles, whether it was because it was beautiful or because I was newly overwhelmed in ways that didn't feel completely frustrating. And then just the world's beautiful. I just really enjoy like going, okay, I'm going to go from one point to the next. And all in all, it was a kind of a full, hopeful journey. And then, of course, there's just jank. You know, it's like you go into a village and you just go, someone's got a pet ox, and you just kill the ox, and that's bad. That's not a noble thing to do. And everyone's like, "What's up? Who cares? I just killed that ox."
There are some issues too with some of the stealth as well. Like you can outwit the AI, and I'm sure Sucker Punch is flipping out right now and trying to, patch and smooth everything over. But
that was a game that got to ship. You could tell where they're like, this has gotten to ship.
But
like,
there's so much in this game.
There's
so much that works so beautifully. Hold on a second. My kid turned up Teen Titans. I got to tell her to turn that down. Hey, Ruby, you cannot watch TV while I'm playing.
Please leave this in the video because
this is truly in the basement.
No, it's not plugged in, and it's very loud. Okay.
Hey, at least she's not, jumping to Marvel. I don't know. What's your
No, it's good that she's watching Teen Titans. I'm good with that, but she just can't have it blasting behind me.
But so let's say, I think all of us agree that this is for a giant game, not perfect, but compelling and worth playing through.
Oh my God.
Oh, definitely.
Go ahead.
In terms of polish, I'd say there was Days Gone, which I was fine with, but definitely had some significant issues. And there's The Last of Us Part 2. And Ghost of Tsushima slots in right there in the middle. Like, you can
so, yeah.
tell there's some jank and some issues, but I really, I vibed with it hard.
Yeah. And it's also a game where you keep uncovering its value the more that you sort of explore, and the more quiet moments. I think that's what really kind of resonated for me, is like when you're honestly, like, the first time you do a haiku, it's a little cheesy. I think it's like, oh, okay, well, this is right on the nose. And then you do it a few times. It's like, oh my God, I appreciate this Zen so much right now. And then you go into the middle of just abject carnage. You're just surrounded, and you feel you're sweating, and your pulse is racing.
I gotta say,
full value.
One thing that I really love is that I'm not much for the Uncharted wall climb, where you're just grabbing onto a wall and climbing because there's some cinematic scene or because they're hiding the load time. For one reason or another, you got to climb a crap ton of Uncharted and Tomb Raider. I get it. But I really enjoyed the fact that the climbing in Ghost of Tsushima is almost entirely just to get to a beautiful mountaintop. And it wants you to realize that what you were doing is putting forth effort to get to a ridiculous view. And that's and with little storytelling bits in between sometimes. But I just really liked the way that those were choreographed. And that's really tough to do a few times, let alone as many times as they do. I just thought that was such a surprising, like, oh, that's such a nice thing that this doesn't suck.
Yeah, and I was really excited to see those, because I've been a long time for people who are just being introduced to me. I'm a very big Assassin's Creed fan across the entire series. They're all back there on my bookshelf. And when they switched to the ability to parkour across anywhere in the world, they also minimized the addition of traversal puzzles, like Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, and those had traversal dungeons, sort of harkening back to that Prince of Persia roots. Right. And that's gone because you can parkour anywhere now. And they've just sort of minimized that. And moving to sort of the older Assassin's Creed, the Uncharted style climbing and the shrines allows them to sort of make those traversal puzzles again, where you're really trying to figure out, like, where does the developer want me to figure out, like, where are they trying to get me to go? And I love that.
It's like they kludged another game in the middle of this huge open world. Yes. And it's very fun, and it's very effective. And that's the thing about this game, is that it's it's thumb candy. Like, it's just so easy to play. It's just really, really enjoyable. And it's so fast as well. Like, he is so athletic and so graceful. There's no cumbersome to the character. It's just your ability to control the camera and the crowd that you might run into.
Well,
But
I love what you said. I love what you say about how fast Jin is, because the thing that cracked me up at first was, oh, I can just grab bamboo while I'm on my horse. But as you go through, you're just like, I do need those supplies. And it is kind of cool to see a little thing glow and just go, whoosh, and just grab crap while you're along the way. Like, I think that it's easy to laugh at, but like as a gameplay mechanic, it works.
Yeah, he's badass. How do you guys feel as the PlayStation 4 wraps up? Did Sony deliver on the promise of this machine?
I think there's going to be forum threads for the rest of time that will talk about PlayStation 4 being one of the greatest consoles ever because of all of these very specific, memorable games that were either exclusive or did very well on PlayStation 4. That's the thing and I think Ghost of Tsushima is such an awesome capstone to what Sony has done as a first party. I mean, we can talk about some of the little ones, like Astrobot VR is one of these incredible games that not everyone got to play, but that's like
still great.
And
incredible,
there's just like, I think each of us could list off 3 or 4 different things that were either download only or big first party that will be remembered 10, 15 years from now, and it'll be like nostalgic stuff as people go into retro stores to pick up a giant PS4 while they install the PS9 into their skull.
Yeah, I would have switched probably in terms of releases Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us Part 2 to make Last of Us Part 2 sort of, that's a little bit more forward thinking. And as I've described Ghost of Tsushima, it really feels like the entire generation's ethos about open world design, like they took from a bunch of different games and sort of crafted the open world action adventure game to sort of finish things off.
Which also feels a bit next gen too, like when you look at it, partially because of the art direction. But it loads quickly, it moves quickly, it's very fluid and like the game doesn't fight you. The camera may every once in a while, but I think that's kind of a quibble because we're getting so used to navigating 3D worlds like this. But I feel like the 1-2 punch in terms of especially on PS4 Pro. I don't know how these games run on a launch PlayStation 4, but on the Pro, they Last of Us 2 and this game just look outstanding, and the HDR fidelity and the surround sound. I didn't know this about the Kurosawa mode in Ghost of Tsushima. It doesn't just change the visuals to vintage black and white, but it actually changes the audio panorama as well, so it sounds a lot more mono and squished in. I was like, man, this sounds very, because I played a little bit more last night. It's like, sounds very different. And then I expanded back to color and it just, it goes.
I got to say that the Kurosawa mode is one of those things where it's like 90% there. I'm driven nuts because the color data is removed. So when you're in battle, you don't see these flashes of red or blue as enemies come at you. It's just this white flash. I think I understand why that would be muted, but I wish they'd fix that. But everything else about that Kurosawa mode, especially how they handle contrast, is unbelievable, because there's a lot of black and white tone mapping that has to be redone everywhere in the game so that it's not washed out, so that everything is readable. I think that was whatever budget got put into specifically building that and having it not break is phenomenal. And hats off to Sucker Punch for going the extra mile.
Yeah, I liked Kurosawa mode to a point, but as I said in my review, I didn't play too much of it because I felt, even with the effort they put towards it, it was such a disservice to the use of color, and then like being able to like climb to the top of the mountain and then look down into a valley of where you've gone before, places that, and just see the colors popping at you, is such just a beautiful moment. And I'd have to say like 20 or 30% of my time in that game in photo mode.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, that's why they put the command right there in the D-pad. Like, that could have been a battle command, but they know that you're going to be doing that a lot. You don't want to go to pause in order to go to photo mode. It's so good.
Yeah, and pro tip, by the way, it's helpful if you don't know where you need to go. hit photo mode, because you can pull the camera out, you can take some time to look around, see where you're supposed to go, and it pauses the game. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's nice.
It is.
I gotta say, the thing about photo mode that really hits me is you can see, because it lets you dynamically change the time of day. You can see essentially the 7 color palettes that they assign to different times of day, with or without weather on, because they're very deliberate about how the bursts of orange and the bursts of violet, how those hit in the sky, and then how that filters through all of the world, because there's so much really nice dynamic lighting. You could not pre-bake that much beautiful color stuff. You can't. This is not Last of Us, where every single thing is running linearly. The way color bounces in this world is unbelievable, and the fact that you can just at any time be like, you know what, I want this scene to blow up with a whole purpley green party, just and then let's get some clouds and lightning in there in the mix. It's just nuts. It's
not cheap, so kudos to Sony for investing in that. And clearly they believed in what Sucker Punch was putting together. But it's also Sucker Punch's first kind of historical, swing at this. They've done the open world superhero thing, and I love the Infamous games, but this is a very big different departure for them, and they have all of this competition that exists out there, and to come out with such a strong game like this, kind of as your first time up to bat with this idea, is unbelievably, just special. And we just have to give massive kudos to Sucker Punch. They really delivered.
I mean,
how much do you guys think that the PlayStation 4's ability to deliver on these exclusives and to have the success that it's had was predicated on it coming so fast out of the gate at the price point that it did, and sort of ramping up to an install base that kind of shocked the development world, and not only got all of Sony's first party support and the money that they spent on those games, but also got a lot of other external publishers to make PlayStation 4 exclusives, which I think helped to further usher in more people sort of aligning with PlayStation 4.
Well, time's going to tell on all of the finagling that went on behind the scenes, because we had the Xbox 360 generation. There was a whole swell of really smart people at Microsoft who helped build what Xbox Live Arcade was in a big way, because of partnerships with developers, with Microsoft saying, here's money for stuff that you didn't realize was going to be awesome, was going to change the industry. And then Microsoft gave up, because they're like, we need to chase the Wii and Chase Connect, and the whole bureaucracy behind the scenes there fell apart. And PlayStation said, yeah, we can scoop that up. We just have to hire a few people, make a few agreements. And some people left Sony during the PlayStation 4 era after laying the bricks for some of the biggest stuff. Like, God, we had that in E3 where Final Fantasy VII and Shenmue were announced at the same time, and people lost their minds. Those didn't necessarily turn out, well, Shenmue didn't turn out the way that we all had hoped. But like, that groundwork takes time and takes staff. So that's one thing that you don't get because of PlayStation 4 having a certain clock speed or a certain amount of RAM. Now, in terms of engineering, they really nailed what they needed to do to say, oh, wait, Xbox is very similar. Okay, well, let's make sure that we have just more general RAM available, because Xbox One had a split RAM architecture that was like fine. And then just making sure the clock speeds were a little better. Essentially, that 1080p versus 900p difference lasted for 7 years. And that install base is something that Xbox will continue to play catch up on for a while.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing that worked out in their favor, not just when they announced and hit that price point and didn't have to worry about online DRM and all those early mistakes that Microsoft made in this generation, was they also came in with a very strong understanding of what their first party studios were doing, and what the fact that PlayStation and Nintendo pretty much control Japan, and Microsoft is a non-factor there. So they have on one side the very strong Western, and they had some missteps like the Order 1886,
right?
In the beginning. But once they sort of hit that, the God of War, Spider-Man, all of those, that's a bunch of big budget Western games that they can work with. And then they also had control of sort of the Japanese side of things. Like, the only way to get many of those Japanese games from like great developers, and picking up Bloodborne like in the sort of middle of there
Yeah.
was just an amazing coup. So I think they win, and that's an issue that carries forward with Microsoft. Like Japan is still a strong chunk of what enthusiast players want from a console.
And Japanese development has just been on fire the
Oh yeah,
last decade. I feel like, like it's been cranked up. It blows me away. There are quarters throughout the year where it's just one fantastic Japanese release, one after another.
right.
And yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. I feel like Xbox, gets the the port support of games that probably initially start with a PlayStation deal, or some timed
Right.
exclusive ending, and then it finally comes to the Xbox later on, or it's missing some of the features or whatever. But yeah, Sony has been able to lock down a lot of great Japanese titles, as well as pay for some massive games like Last of Us 2 and God of War and Ghost of Tsushima, which Xbox hasn't been able to do, but they've been buying all of these different studios, and now we get
Yeah,
to find out
I was
whether
about
that's
to
going to pay
say,
off.
yeah, the Obsidians and buying In Exile, Obsidian, all those stuff, and probably throwing a good bit of money at them to really sort of I don't want to say B grade. Those are mid-level studios, giving them sort of the money, and you can sort of uh, see what that benefit will have in, say, Larian's Divinity Original Sin 2 to Baldur's Gate 3. Like that, the difference there is they have the expertise, but they get more resources.
Yeah.
And I expect that you'll see some of that with Obsidian and In Exile for their next games. And I think Microsoft is in a place that they can build on that. I'd say the biggest problem is I don't expect to see those dividends pay off for another 2 to 3 years.
Well, that's funny. Because we don't know what that payoff time is. That's the question mark as we go into, and I know Victor wanted to talk about this Xbox event coming up this week on Thursday, the 23rd. Because the question is, they started investing in some of these studios a while ago. Last E3, over a year ago, was, them on stage showing how many of these studios had been purchased, and that it's all been pretty quiet. And does that mean that there's just going to be announcement after announcement of new IP and sequels coming up? Like that's the big thing I'm curious about is what those dividends are. I mean, God, Double Fine they picked up. Like, are we ever going to see something from them? Are we going to? And the initiative is like the rumor magnet as of right now, because people really want a certain formerly first-person shooter series to come back under their guise. Like, is that going to really happen? Or are those rumors true?
See, the problem is like half of those studios are in the middle. Like In Exile is finishing Wastelands 3. Obsidian has Grounded. Like they are finishing up games. So I just feel like the spin up that's where the 2 to 3 years mentally for me comes from.
What happens with Outer Worlds?
That's a good question, because I think Outer
Worlds, it's a
Worlds,
successful game, and it's a great beginning of something, I feel.
yeah, and you can build upon that and sort of, so like you have the foundation. So now it's spending on creating new planets, crafting new stories. So maybe that's like a shorter turnaround time, but again, it's kind of, who knows.
Well, and certainly Phil Spencer's been pretty vocal about the idea that he's against the concept of exclusives. He thinks that Sony investing in exclusives is kind of antithetical to what gaming is about. And, by the measures that Xbox is taking right now by allowing xCloud users to access their gamer pass games and play them wherever they want to, and releasing, Game Pass games on PC at the same time, and it's all, all these big first-party titles are included in that subscription. It does feel like Xbox is trying to let people have their games wherever they want them to. And if any publisher is going to sort of cross a line first and put their first party stuff onto their competitors' platform. I mean, we saw that relationship already with Xbox and Nintendo. I've been predicting that we'll see a Halo on PlayStation, in the not too distant future. Do you guys think I'm nuts with that, or do you think that'll happen?
I mean, I do think you're nuts about Halo on PlayStation because there's a certain line that Microsoft has yet to cross. They could cross it at some point. But when Phil Spencer came up, he essentially looked at Microsoft's Ballmer decade, which is just failure after failure of not getting a specific device or getting into an ecosystem and not understanding how people use digital entertainment and digital tools. And the era ever since, once Ballmer was left, has been Microsoft saying, we just want to make it easy for you. There are so many computing devices. We didn't get Microsoft Phone out there. That didn't happen. We didn't get Xbox One into every living room as the TV hub. Fine. How do we just get to where you are and get you to spend your money with us and get locked in? Because Xbox Game Pass, but also Xbox Live and just buying games on Xbox is all about saying, however you got the game, whether you got a disc or a download code or a subscription, if you got it at Xbox, we want to make it super easy for you to feel like when you're here, you get to stick around. Because normally in this digital world, most companies have been kind of, oh, you got to upgrade your iPhone? Wow, you just lost a bunch of 32-bit apps. Like that's one big example of one of the biggest tech companies that people love leaving people behind in terms of software. And Phil Spencer has been so bold about saying, yeah, we're going to support old software. We're going to have cross-generational software. We want you to, all in all, put your money into our ecosystem. And that is a 10 or 15 or 20-year vision, as opposed to PlayStation 5, which is saying it's got to be about the games, and we're leaving the old generation behind, and we're creating these severe lines. And that, I think, is
if we are, though. I feel like they're going to surprise us with some backwards compatibility, in direct competition with what Xbox is leading on.
Well, but Sony's executives have come out and said, we think it's important to have a line between generations. And Phil, go ahead.
And they're probably like, they literally like PlayStation 4 GameStop. Like, all of us assume that The Last of Us Part 2 is the last PS4 game.
Right.
Like, just period. Whereas Microsoft will probably continue supporting some flavor of Xbox One for another couple of years. Like, they will continue to say, make a game for Series X, but also release a version of it on Xbox One. Maybe not original, but at least 1X or something like that.
Although Xbox has been quick to just kill a line too. Like the move from the original Xbox to Xbox 360 was unbelievably abrupt. It was like, okay, that's over, and now this is our new machine. And it was so quick too. It was after only 4 years or something that it was on the market, and arguably an incredibly powerful machine. But that I think was a major contributing factor on Xbox 360 being so successful, is that they just went, nope, we're out now. And one could say the same thing about PlayStation 4. I think that it was cheaper and out quickly, relatively.
I mean,
although PS3 did have a nice long run too.
I mean, my point with all of that is that, Microsoft did used to follow the old paradigm, because everyone did that in the olden days.
Yeah.
What backwards compatibility went away once we switched from cartridges to CDs and that sort of thing. But we're in this whole new era where people sort of Microsoft wants you to have their login. They want you to just be there for a while. And so I'm curious about how xCloud will figure into everything, because xCloud could be the connect the dots answer to, you've got this old device, but you want to play newer games. Well, instead of running it at 720p, why don't you get on Game Pass and then you stream it from the cloud, and it'll run better than your Xbox One could run it natively, but you've already got Xbox One.
xCloud is currently only mobile, but it could run through a client on an Xbox One.
And that's been that's been the plan all along,
or
in terms
a PlayStation
of
4.
I mean, but exactly. Like, if they would love, they would love to give, like Sony, they would give Sony a cut to get on their devices. Because again, they just want every account. They want every user.
This is what I'm saying. I think that they're looking at the $200 billion evaluation of Netflix and going, Netflix is worth as much as Disney. you know, and it's
Yeah.
because of their ability to be omnipresent, to be everywhere, to be available any device you pick up. And I think everybody is kind of looking at that, and including PlayStation, and they're I'm dipping their toes into PC publishing, and they have their own cloud service as well. But Xbox is being incredibly aggressive, maybe because they don't have a lot of stories to tell otherwise. They don't have a lot of other things to say.
There's also sort of a push and pull that I find interesting, in that Microsoft is definitely being far more consumer friendly. And I think that will help them in the long run continue to make money and revenue and sort of grow that audience. But Sony's hard cutoff will allow them to sell systems, assuming the price. Like the marketing story for buying a PlayStation 5 feels stronger than buying an Xbox Series X.
Well, especially when you end with a game like Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2. Aren't those just amazing, almost advertisements for what we can expect,
Right.
And they also hint at the sort of future potential of the medium and the visual fidelity that we can expect. Like, that's baseline on PS, and it looks. I mean, these games already look next generation. Like to people walking in from first gen PS4 to this would think that we're on new hardware.
And Ghost of Tsushima loads up so quickly. It feels like they're like, hey, think of how much better this is going to be on PS5. Like a 2-second loads, that's not even going to be a problem anymore.
So what does Microsoft have to do at this event on Thursday? What do they have to say? Obviously, Halo's got to bring it, and we got to be excited. But Sam, what do you think they've got to do?
Okay, so my guess is everything that you haven't heard about this summer so far will probably emerge. Number one, we already have that leak, and by leak I mean a full-on Microsoft store page for this new Activision shooter, The Red Dream. Is that the name of it? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
The code name. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a code name thing up on the Microsoft store that says Activision, it says shooter, it says rated M for mature. So that's probably showing up on Thursday. Big shocker, Call of Duty at an Xbox event.
Yep.
So then there's also, what about that project between From Software and George R.R. Martin?
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring. We haven't heard about that for a while. Is that going to emerge? I'm not saying it will, but like, there's so many different little question marks of software that hasn't popped up in a while. And my guess is we'll get a third of that. I'm the guy who's going to give a crap.
Getting the price?
We're not. No, because as they said, they're only focusing on games.
They're playing chicken. Both sides are playing chicken now.
Yeah, nobody's ready to cough up the first one without having some really, really big understanding of having the winning proposition. And I think the reason Microsoft is going to wait is because we still think Lockhart is going to pop up, because that's the Xbox Series S that keeps getting rumored, and they just killed Xbox One X. That, let's not get too confused, but that system no longer, you can't even get it at Amazon. It's been delisted. You have to buy it used.
So Lockhart will be better than Xbox One X.
We don't know. We just know that there needs to be a middle between the old 2013 Xbox One and the brand new 4K, 8K, whatever. We imagine that's quite a wide divide. And Microsoft has been keen on giving people grades and steps. So the rumors of Lockhart make it seem like that's going to happen. So my guess is we're going to see a price for Microsoft when we get two prices. That's my guess. But as far as this week, I think Halo Infinite has to be the big tentpole. It's got to be this thing that makes people excited. And the good news for them is that Halo 3 just came out as Master Chief Collection on PC and has been blowing up on Steam. It's a great port. The buzz is good. The feeling is Halo 3 is a very specific moment when Bungie was just firing on all cylinders. And if they can ride that momentum and say, right, we remember that, we want to give you that, then even if it's not that great, as long as it feels like that, it'll be a great event for them.
Yeah, I think maybe you do the Halo Infinite, assuming it's got a strong single-player campaign. I still feel there's probably going to be some sort of Destiny-style multiplayer component, like always online kind of thing.
Yeah. We're going to
I'd
get a lot of eye
say
rolling if that happens, aren't we? But I think it
you
can
are,
turn
but
into a huge business for them if they are doing that.
yeah, if you do, because once you that's part of keeping people on, and
Yeah,
especially seeing Sea of Thieves slowly grow. I'm
right.
sure Microsoft is looking at that and being like, we need
Yeah,
to make sure that that's a part of Halo as well.
yeah.
Um,
It's almost
I
like these game companies, and I'm being, I'm being dismissive and reductive here, but it's almost like they're creating browsers, or chat bots or something
oh,
like
chat
that.
rooms,
Or
yeah.
yeah, it's like they're cool games, but I don't know. I like the finale. I guess I'm so old school. I like to jump in. That's why it's been such a treat to play these massive single player games that Sony's been publishing. I like there to be an ending to these
Right.
things,
But that's, I
and
think, Microsoft's acquisition strategy has been a lot of stuff that leans in the single player
Yeah, and
direction. Mike has
that was
listed
the
all
other
that
thing.
stuff.
I was going to say probably Hellblade 2 gameplay,
hmm
just a little brief taste,
that'll be great.
and then I think they're probably going to CG trailer like Obsidian's next big RPG world,
Right.
like to say like this is what we are working on. You're not going to see it for a while, but this is where all of that money
Love
and
that.
resources are going.
It's such a
Like,
shame that Outer Worlds couldn't be that, because here's a planet hopping game that they've got the core concepts for. And if you gave them visual and hardware muscle to wrap that imagination around, it could just be show stopping. It could be incredible. I mean, they give us space travel and the whole 9 yards
But
on
that's a
that.
possibility. I mean, we're all talking about possibilities and dreams and hopes. And
Yeah.
Microsoft has a pretty wide portfolio of studios right
Sure they do
now
now. Yeah.
that each
Yeah.
have about a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Because here's one thing. I know what Mike's saying about, well, some of these studios already had projects and they're kind of like catching up. But how much did Microsoft say, hey, we're going to give you money to build an 80-person team that's working in secret while you've got this other thing in the works? Like, we don't know. Maybe all of these companies are just grasping at straws and have garbage. Maybe
Well, and
they've got big
plus they're
surprises.
scooping up the ownership on a lot of these already in
yeah,
production projects. They didn't just buy the companies; they bought IP
all
as
the
well.
stuff
Like
that
they
they
own,
have.
yeah, they own Outer Worlds. Outer Worlds is published by private division, but it's owned by Microsoft now. So because they own Obsidian.
Now
So
Yeah.
now here's my question for y'all. What is the old franchise that you haven't heard from a while that you really hope will show up? And I ask this because my hope, my fingers crossed, is Killer Instinct gets some sort of brand new, holy cow, you're not going to believe it, update that either carries on the original thing with all the characters they have, or just does something really cool. Because man, that game has enjoyed a good year of just fan excitement. And that game's old. That's
Yeah.
2013, but people are still playing it, finding it anew, playing it online because the netcode's actually good. Like,
yeah,
that's the one I really hope that they say, yeah, you know what? We didn't mess that up and we still have it. And we're going to keep it moving forward as a really good online 2D fighting series.
The last three I was gonna say that they probably need to finish up. One, it's probably the initiative. Everyone is assuming that's Perfect Dark.
yeah,
Playground Games is working on another one. Everyone's assuming that's Fable.
Fable.
I
Yeah,
assume both of those will appear. The third that I think that they need to at least kick off the generation right. They need to pay some Japanese studio
mm,
for something like Bloodborne, a Microsoft exclusive, like
super hardcore game.
hardcore, very Japanese game that
Right.
Microsoft will own.
What would you want that to be, Mike?
Oh man, I don't know what I'd want it to be. I'm always very sad that Scalebound, like, and I think that's also part of it. Like, they need to prove that the misstep of canceling and shelving Scalebound, like, they need to pave that over a little bit.
Yes.
I don't know exactly what
I can't
game that
believe
would
Platinum
be. I don't even
is
know.
out there
Platinum.
alone, and they're I'm happy for them. They're self-publishing, but holy crap, that studio, man, like release after release, they're just incredible. And I cannot believe that neither Sony or Nintendo or Xbox has said, nope, you're going to be making stuff
Oh,
for my
it's too
platform.
late now. They're
They're
Tencent.
huge.
Tencent started, like and everyone got real worried when Tencent funded them.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's like they're fine now.
Yeah, they
But I
are.
feel like Tencent is going to give them some more. Like, come on, guys, come on to the Tencent like family. Um,
Oh
but
no.
I think that's a couple years down the line.
Yes. Well, I mean, we are talking about this, play anywhere type future, right? And
Right,
Tencent's a factor in all that, and could be even in partnership with these other players that we're talking about here to some degree.
right.
Um, what would you like to see from Xbox? You want to see Killer Instinct? Is there another one that you'd like to see, Sam?
Well, I mean, I'm a Battletoads fan, and they announced that, and it didn't get a very strong reaction at last year's E3. It's very much an older generation 2D. Like, if they somehow made it look like a butt-kicking Cuphead, like maybe it'll have a shot at getting people
Yeah,
excited,
yeah.
other than the old men like me who played on the NES back in the day.
It's weird that they're not going pixel art with it, right? Like there is so much good pixel sprite-based stuff happening.
I mean, I'll
right
tell
now.
you, if they want full animation, because that game is all about, that game was always about crazy animation. It felt
Sure.
like a Warner
Yeah.
Brothers cartoon, but with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles butt kicking. And I want to see what Forza has, because long ago the rumor was that Forza was building something called Forza X, which was going to just be a service that you just got it for free and bought cars a la carte, and it just stayed alive, as opposed to what's been the standard model of you buy the new game for $60 every year and you dump your cars, and it gives you like a tiny experience point bucket for playing the older games. And I'm like, this is the time to just make Forza as a service, to make it something where you get to keep investing in it over time and combine a bunch of different stuff. I would like to see a Forza that feels like a true living product that will never be canceled or never be replaced.
Sports games feel like that's the next plateau for them in general, right? Especially if they're going to be policed into taking back a lot of their loot box mechanics and stuff. It
Right.
feels like, have a low barrier of entry, but then sell the components,
Right.
like maybe you get 4 teams or I don't want that to
what I
happen,
mean
but
is,
it feels like that could be a way that people.
but a Forza that was built for Game Pass would be great. It would be
But-
a really
Would it be would it be Forza Motorsport or Forza Horizon? So my answer to that is Forza Horizon. I would like another Horizon game.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. They're almost story-based, those Horizon games, right? Because
Right.
there's so much about the environment and the shenanigans that you get up to based on the geography that's crafted for us.
Yeah. If Motorsport took that service model, I'd be fine with it.
That's my guess.
It would be a little bit. I'd be a little fuzzier on, but I would want another Horizon, because part of the magic of the Horizon is here's a new locale.
Yeah.
Go out there and have fun.
No, I think the service one would be about an esports driven Forza Motorsport. That's a service that's always living, whether because you're competing or because you're creating liveries or whatever part of it you want to be in that ecosystem. They would, kind of all these other esports racing sims that are out there. The time is ripe for Microsoft to really get Forza positioned to be a product that you can, as a racing fan, be invested in for 10 years.
And you bring up Battletoads, but see, part of the thing is like under the old model, you need that game to sell X number of copies.
Yeah.
With Microsoft, with Game Pass, they can release Battletoads and just whatever. Like, it's another game that goes on Game Pass. It makes the overall ecosystem look better. They can point to all of the different variety that they have. So, like, they no longer, I'm sure they want more people to download and more people to play it, but they don't need to be like, all right, Battletoads is coming out. Our marketing is telling us we're only going to sell like 100,000 copies or something over its entire lifetime. Maybe we should cancel this. Now they can just be like, whatever, like just put it out there.
And that's the exciting thing about the number of acquisitions they have, because when all of those studios are doing different experiments and they're trying new IP, they now have this new cushion of, instead of canceling and instead of tanking, like, it had to be, it's going to cost too much for marketing and printing discs and et cetera, kill that game. Now it's, let's throw it on Game Pass and maybe it'll strike fire. And that would be really awesome to just see Microsoft say, hey, in the Game Pass future, all of our studio's crazy experiments are going to go live, and we're going to push the big kahunas, the Halo Infinites, and the other big budgets with marketing, with store stuff. But you're just going to be in this cushy spot on Xbox Game Pass. Oh, and all these weird things we're going to publish them on the Switch as well. And you got to pay 20 or 30 bucks for those, but on Game Pass, they're included and free. Like, I really do think that's going to be their future. And I think it's going to look good in the bigger picture because, again, Game Pass and Xbox are like they're making more money now than they were before, and they're still a tiny fraction of Microsoft's whole budget. Whereas Sony needs PlayStation to do well because Sony as a corporation is a mess. So it's like that's its own sort of weird behind the scenes story that I cannot stop thinking about. It's not as exciting as comparing graphics, but it's totally a factor.
PlayStation has been a shining jewel in Sony's whole business model, but yeah, it's corporately it's structured very differently. Xbox, I think, is kind of like it's not the paramount thing that's driving Microsoft forward by any means, but it is a business unit that's kind of left to its own devices, I think, and there's a great deal of trust that's given to the team behind all of Xbox. But I think the subscription model could really change things around, because everybody's driving towards this idea of a Netflix for games, and we talk about it all the time. And one could easily argue that they're furthest along.
Yeah, and it's not, that idea is not great for everything. And I think part of the problem with things like Stadia and others is that they're predicated on that's all you have. And I wrote this when I first looked at xCloud. But xCloud is like, look, if you want to stream it, you want to stream Gears 5, go ahead. But you also can just buy Gears 5 and download it and have it. You can buy it on a disc. Like, the part of the problem with just streaming through, say, Stadia is not everyone has a great connection. And you sort of have to be able to play around with that.
And I always thought that was nuts with Stadia. Like, Google's got so much money, they could have made a play with another partner out there to offer download and streaming, but we could do
a whole nother episode about what happens when big tech comes in with a bunch of money, but not necessarily a true from the bottom up gaming vision. Stadia and Amazon Game Studios, those are two back-to-back stories of what happens that way. And I think Microsoft had to dig itself out of the same hole when Kinect and television were the driving forces behind everything on Xbox One. So, and that's what we're seeing now is them going, you know what? We as Microsoft, we have a bunch of money, but that money's got to pay for people with a vision. And that's why those acquisitions, I think, are optimistic and give us hope. Even if they don't all turn out to have big hit games, it's at least Microsoft saying money doesn't just automatically generate games that make people give a crap.
But we're clearly going to start to see something from these studios on Thursday. Halo's going to be the big money, but we're going to start to at least get a glimpse of what the future of content first party from Xbox is going to be from all of these different acquisitions. And that's exciting. And we're probably going to get a taste of what Rare means post Sea of Thieves for this huge.
I think at the very least, even if they're not CG trailers, they're going to be the kind of, here's the team. We're talking about what we're working on. Here's some concept art on the wall. Here's a name. We love you guys. And it's like, okay. Like,
they should get you on that stage, Mike.
I was going to say, I didn't know you were building PR for Xbox, man.
That sounded amazing.
Yeah, like, so I, like, at least even those aspirational, like, this is going to come eventually. Like, when Shenmue 3 was announced, remember, that was like barely a trailer, but it was Yu Suzuki coming out and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to kickstart it. And that was all you needed. So,
I tweeted about this today, but this goes back to the original Xbox, and I want Crimson Skies, like a new Crimson Skies. I've been saying that every year since that first one came out. I freaking adore that franchise. I know we've got Star Wars Squadrons.
Do I need to go get my copy of Blinks and hold that up to the screen just to get our OG Xbox cred here? Because I'll do it. I'll get Blinks out. We're at a time suite, baby.
I just had such fantastic memories of getting into online dogfights and how effortless it was and how fun it was. And even if today, when you throw you know, the enhanced edition of the original Xbox game at Xbox One X. Still looks great, still holds up. I know I'm not getting it, but I ask for it every time Xbox puts on one of these different
Yeah, if you're
presentations.
talking full dreams, Phantom Dust will remain my dream. And
They said that was coming. They said that it was coming. They were going to do. Oh, they re-released it, but then they.
yeah, they re-released it and they were doing a new one, but then they canceled that, and that killed the small studio that was. And in this world of digital CCGs, the fact that you own essentially an action game and a CCG, and you're not like ready for that, is just mystifying to me.
Especially with Game Pass, right? Because I think one of the things that this sort of digital a la carte library that you've always got with you, it completely shatters the release schedule concept and the idea that you've got to have big business on launch because the shelf space is going to disappear. That's all gone. You want lots and lots of nuggets to kind of dive into on your archive. And a game like that, it would be gangbusters. I think it'd be awesome, you know, but it would take time for it to earn its money back. But that's what these services are about now. It's about wealth of offerings. I mean, what were we talking about with Peacock just launching? You know, massive classic NBC shows are available on this thing. I think all those Columbo episodes.
Yeah, pretty much all the Columbo is
and
there.
that becomes this big, you know, hype thing that has ramifications across Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm well, that's what games need too.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Peacock, it has this thing called channels where they're just essentially channels 24/7, just running of various themed, and it's great. You can just put it on in the background, and I was like, why doesn't anyone do that? But yeah, like being able to have a wide variety of things that people can just download and pick, and you don't have to, like, you can heavily market them, but you don't need to, because generally people are just engaging with Game Pass in the same way they would Netflix. They're like, let's go out. What are we gonna play today? And once you add xCloud to Game Pass, and they don't even have to wait to download it, or if they figure out the median, which is a slower download of the actual game while you're playing it streaming, that's the money shot. Being able to just like, let's start playing right now. We'll download the game in the background, and once it's done, right, and once it's done downloading, we'll switch you over from the Steam to the actual game. And
games need that so badly. And honestly, like, imagine if every backwards compatible original Xbox game was just instantly added to Game Pass, so that people could see the roots of where Xbox came from. And most people didn't play those games. Let's be honest. They didn't pick up the machine. It was marginally successful. It was successful enough for Xbox to continue. But what a way to curate and archive and deliver all of that history to people to just
Fusion frenzy for everyone. I love it. I'm into it. Now, here's my question for y'all. How many games do you think Microsoft is going to confirm for this year at this event?
Oh, for this year?
Yeah, for this year. Because Sony has been very, very quiet
I know
about confirming anything for 2020.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a very light end of the year schedule. I think we're going to have a lot of big indie games and a lot of, or not very many huge AAA. I think 3 is probably a pretty. I think we're getting Halo this year. We're getting Miles Morales this year on Sony. But it's pretty up in the air as to what specifically is going to be launching in 2020.
I mean, thankfully, we got Cyberpunk 2077 and some of these others in the pipeline. Avengers, that game still exists, you know. So, we have those third parties that are in the know. But in terms of Microsoft first party, I also imagine 3 total tops, if even, being announced this week, because I'm curious about what's coming this year. And I think Microsoft has had a very light first party year. So I think it would be really good for them to at least reinforce that we're going to get some big first party stuff from them in 2020.
They have to surprise us with one this year to sell that machine. I think Halo sells the machine, but I think they also have to say, and we got this, something that we don't know yet. You know, they can bank on some of the third parties like Call of Duty. I wouldn't be surprised by a Forza announcement for launching this year. They've been able to kind of maintain a pretty decent schedule with those games. But I think they have to surprise us with a first-party thing that we haven't guessed yet,
And see,
launching this year.
I think that second party Japanese game is that surprise anchor. That game that you pay, and this is like, look, we haven't forgotten Japan exists. We're sorry. Now, is that like Phantasy Star Online 3 or something like, see, right there, like your face just automatically, because that would be the kind of game, like, not everyone cares about Phantasy Star Online. But if you came out and said Phantasy Star Online 3, there's a certain section of the enthusiast player base who is losing their minds.
Oh, dude, I mean, that's what Nintendo and Sony specialize in. You know, they know that some of these titles are big to a degree, or massive to a specific audience, but that's what propels them forward. And those are the heat seekers that go out and get these consoles on launch day. And Xbox plays more conservatively than that, and has historically. And I think it's time for them to not technologically, not with investment, but I think in terms of content, I think they need to take a massive risk like that and go all in and say, yep, we're here, we're gamers, we're big nerds for this, and we believe in something like this. And it would be cool if it was an established IP, but it would be better, I think, if it was something out of the blue with an amazing developer, maybe one that they've acquired, that just shocks us all. I mean, that would be the best outcome and the best story out of the event.
Yeah.
Yep. Into it.
If it's not Crimson Skies.
Sorry, Vic.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll definitely have you both back again. Mike, you have an amazing voice, my friend.
This is what I'm told. This is what I'm told. And everyone's like, why don't you do more? It's like, because we don't have a ton of resources, but I will do more podcasts or videos or something.
Love it. Well, I'm into it. I'm subscribing.
And I'll be inviting you back to the basement for sure. But thank you both, gentlemen. Fantastic to have Sam Machkovech and Mike Williams. Follow them on Twitter. And thank you all for watching Vic's Basement. We'll be back soon with new content for you. And until then, play forever.